Well, if my response is what I have control over, and I can dig deeper and understand what's causing me to respond a certain way, and then just press pause and just make sure that what I'm doing is going to move the conversation forward. What I'm doing is going to be a positive influence on the people around me. Just relax, understand that point of view, understand where my point of view is, and let's find a path to move forward.
Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we sit down with executive leaders to explore what leadership really means through the lens of their stories, their wins, their struggles, their vision, and their lessons along the way. I'm Ty Hammond, founder of One Mountain Leadership and creator of the True Leadership Approach, an awareness-based path that helps leaders shift their focus from what to do about their problems to how to grow from them. Whether you're just stepping into leadership or are well-seasoned and at the top of your game, your potential won't be realized following someone else's script, but you can draw insights from their stories and turn it into wisdom by putting it into practice in your own life. Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we explore the essence of leadership beyond tactics and performance by sitting down with executives to hear what matters most to them. I'm your host, Ty Hammond. Today's guest is Kevin Martinelli. Kevin is the Regional President of Sales for the West and General Manager of the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com at USA Today Co. With nearly 2 decades of leadership experience across broadcast, print, and digital media, Kevin has built a career on transforming sales organizations and driving sustainable revenue growth. Known for his preparation, integrity, and people-first leadership, he's led high-performing teams through major shifts in the media landscape while fostering cultures of curiosity and accountability. Passionate about the future of marketing and storytelling, Kevin brings a grounded yet forward-thinking perspective on leadership in times of change. It's a pleasure for me to have Kevin on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thank you, Ty. Pleasure to be here for sure.
So I always start here with this question. Every leader, every human being, of course, has a beginning. I've found that who we are as leaders at work and in life starts taking shape long before we advance to any executive position of leadership. Curious if you're willing to share who's someone from your early life or an early experience that really shaped the kind of leader that you are today.
Yeah, I believe our leadership foundations they're built over time. They're built through experiences, and they're built with the relationships and the people that we interact with as we go through life. I grew up in a really tiny town out in Oregon, and my parents were very influential. My mom, my stepdad really were the beacons of hard work. And what you have to do as blue collar workers to work hard to ensure that your path is pushed by you, not by somebody else. So that early on for me was, those two and my older brother, they really just paved that way of like, if you do the work and you put the work in, you outwork and out hustle somebody, you're going to be okay. I was thinking about somebody in particular, just a quick little story about a baseball coach I had in high school. So in a small town, it doesn't take much to be one of the better athletes in a small town because the pool of people is smaller. So I thought I was pretty good. And as a sophomore, I had a bad knee injury when I was a freshman in high school, which is one of those really rare ones. And so I focused on baseball. And as a sophomore, I was playing a little varsity. So when I got to be my junior year, I'll be the guy, and I was a catcher. So that's sort of one of those natural leader positions in the field general. I was a catcher. And my baseball coach at the time was a guy named Grant Bowstead, just an incredible human being. And I thought, well, I just have to show up and I'm the guy. And he started a sophomore over me my junior year in high school. And it was devastating. I played other positions, moved me around. I was like, no, what do you mean I'm not the guy? Like, what happened? And so he taught me a lesson that year. And in my senior year, I went on to go back and catch and start over the other guy. All work. But what he taught me early on was how to remove your ego from the process. Your ego can be your enemy from a leadership perspective. And what he thought was, if you're going to lead this team and be a captain, but your ego is going to influence everybody else around you, we're going to have a problem. And he did it through a way that at the time I had no idea. I was just a dumb kid, 16, 17 years. I had no idea what was going on. But now today I go back and look at it, and he taught me humility. Put your ego aside. Don't let it get in the way. And really, if you're going to lead with with a sense of empathy with the people around you. So the players kind of picked that up, and as a captain in my senior year, I had a great senior year. It was a great lesson for me to learn, and I had a chance to thank him for that not that long ago, probably about 7, 8, well, maybe it was about a decade ago or so. As we bumped into each other at the wedding. We're still same hometown. When I go home, he's there. But he's a great guy. Taught me a really good lesson about check your ego at the door.
I love that story. There's someone I'm going to assume was present, and it came through your story, but you didn't explicitly state it, because for something like that to land in the way that it did for you, I'm assuming that you really felt his care for you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's a great call out, Ty, because I didn't see it at the time. So what I did between my junior and senior year of high school, I asked him, hey, can I be your student aide my senior year? And he was like, yeah. Like, he was a health teacher too. And he was like, not many people ask him to be the student aide of the health teacher and baseball coach. I'm like, I need it, because it didn't take much for me to realize I've got to build a relationship here. And he was willing to build a relationship. And then once I was in his classroom on a daily basis and with him regularly, it was crystal clear how much he cared. And that mattered to me. It mattered to me a lot, because that relationship was just one of those strong affirmations. And I showed up early. I stayed late. I did everything he asked me to do, because, and I'd run through a brick wall for him. And, as a coach, that's all you can ask for with players. You want people who will do that for you. And he knew I would, because I knew he cared.
Absolutely. It's the reason that I brought that out as a particular, point to make explicit is because I really think it's possible that he could have made that same decision without care, and that would have landed completely differently.
Yep.
So
I agree.
I'm curious to hear, I want to expound on this a little bit. How do you feel like that experience informed how you show up as a leader today?
Yeah, I think for me, when you're building relationships with people, there's just some real foundational things that got to be part of that relationship. Trust and respect. Got to be a great listener. You got to listen. And I think if you've got enough care that goes across all of those things, you said the word care, because that's at the foundation of what I try and do, is lead with empathy and care. But those things are so critically important. And I believe at that time, what I found with my experiences with Coach Baustad at that time was our relationships. Again, I said it a second ago, if people know you care, then they'll do a little bit more for you. If they don't believe in you and they don't believe you care, and they think maybe you're just fronting care, it's not real. They're just not going to, do the work that needs to get done, and maybe take a chance. Or worse yet, in my case, they're not going to listen to me. They're going to hear me, but they won't listen to me, and they'll go do it their way a little bit. And I'm not here to control, I'm just here to influence, but if my influence isn't there because they didn't know I cared, then it kind of starts to fall apart from there, I think.
It's a really good segue into this next question, which really is at the heart of this whole podcast experience. Of course, we're exploring the essence of leadership, called true leadership. Of course, that's going to mean different things to different people. What does true leadership mean to you? And what really makes a true leader in your eyes?
I believe that there's leadership and there's effective leadership. I've worked for a lot of really great leaders in my career. But I've also worked for some not so great leaders. I mean, like we all have, we can all, those experiences you draw from as well. And one of the things that I tried to draw from in my past was there's art and science to what we do in our business. And the science is the KPI, data-driven approach, and understanding how the metrics drive the business. And then there's also, the other side is what, do you have the good bedside manner? Are you able to connect with people? Can you establish and build relationships? And can you go story tell in front of a client in a meaningful way using the data to help to drive and influence the decision-making process there? It's the same thing from a leadership perspective with your team. You're doing the same thing. And for me, if we get off that beaten path, and true leadership to me, we get off that beaten path and we're unable to keep the teeter-totter pretty level, then we got a problem. If we're just, it's all data heavy, and that's all we focus on is, hey, Ty, you're not making enough calls. You got to get out in the field more. You're going to make more sales. And that's all I'm talking to you about. Thanks for the advice. Yeah, I had no idea I had to make more calls to create more. But if you start to push it the other direction, and all of a sudden you're like, Ty, you got to make more calls. Here's what that's going to do for you. Here's the why behind it. Here's how I'm going to support you in that. I'm going to make some too right alongside you. We're going to do it together. And now the teeter-totter's back to this level spot. And true leadership to me, that's where you get to be an effective leader. If somebody is, on one of your previous podcasts, somebody who used to work for me was on your podcast and mentioned me as somebody. And to me, that was a sign that I was that true leadership was happening for me with her and that's effective because she was able to recount some of the things that we've gone through together and use me as an example of somebody that she uses as a mentor. So that effective leadership is really the balance between the art and the science of it.
Well, I love that distinction. Art and science, I think, is a really, really good way to put it. And there's so many different schools of leadership, but it's always that, between the what and the how, all of those pieces. I just want to say, and this is a really good segue into my next question here, because that kind of the ability to attune to what is actually needed in the situation is not just a skill. It's not just a skill to learn, right? That requires growth as a human being over time. Of course, life and leadership is a path shaped by fundamental turning points that we encounter along the way. I'm curious if you can share a little bit about a time when you realized that your way of leading or living really no longer met the demands of work and life and real growth was needed.
I have, I'll get a little bit vulnerable in this one. We could do a whole podcast on what not to do because I've got a few of those in my background too. And I'm going to share one of those. I was a boomerang with a company. This is a little over a decade ago, and the executive leader in that role who brought me back, just an absolute, just somebody I wanted to work with him specifically because he's such a great human being. Such a great person, great leader. And I just had heard so much about him, and I had the opportunity to be with him for a little while. I got to come back. And when I came back, I made a lot of critical errors. And I had some stuff going on at home with the health of my wife. And so somebody had reached out and said, hey, do you want to come work for us? And I was like, well, I can't do that. I'm a boomerang. I gave this guy my word that I was going to stick and stay. And I don't want to be the guy. And Ty, you don't know me too well, but like high character, high trust is just like paramount on my list. You got to be high character, high trust people to work in my organization. And I was having these challenges with even having a conversation with somebody else because I gave my word. And I started to tell people internally about the challenge I was having, the struggle I was having, which was a huge mistake. And I had to own that mistake, having that conversation with peers inside of the building. And it's PR 101, tell your story before it's told for you. And my story was told for me by somebody else. And I didn't have a chance to do that. I didn't have a chance to do that with this person. And it broke me because I had to leave again because I felt like I let them down. I felt like I let him down, and that concept of being true and having high character and staying true to your word and do what you say you're going to do. But I placed the blame, Ty, for months. I placed the blame on everybody else did this to me. They went in They went in and told on me. I did not take extreme ownership of the situation at all. And it was 100% on. And it wasn't finally until probably a year or two later that I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was driving my son to college. I was coming home. I was listening to this audio book, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, Extreme Ownership. And I listened to it, and I was in the car for 20 hours. And it was like, I almost broke down and cried in the car because I'm like, I need to own this. This was on me. And I finally had a chance to connect with that individual not too long ago, and just sort of, come to him and say, look, I blew it, and it was my fault. And he was like, he gave me a hug, and I knew he cared. I knew he just such a great human being. And but I think that taking extreme ownership, that stage of my life and in my career, this is again about 11 years ago, I wasn't ready to own my own decisions. I was ready to say I was influenced or somebody did this. And once I finally broke it down and said, you know what, I can't fix situations, but I can own my response to the situation, everything kind of changed for me from that perspective from there.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to me. Accountability is what I call the keystone agreement. It's the foundation of everything. My own little definition of it is the ability to account for your own contribution to whatever it is that you're experiencing. And there's no experience that you have that you don't have a contribution to. And so what I hear in that is that is the shift. I just honor it so much and take a little bit of time to chat on it, because that is the shift where we essentially stop giving away our own agency and our own inner power, and we begin to reclaim that on our own. I'm curious to hear you maybe expound just a little bit more on that. What do you feel like you had to outgrow or let go of in order to begin to really take that ownership and that accountability?
I had to let go. I mean, for me, that one specific instance, what it did was it had me challenge what my response, right? So that whole event plus response equals the outcome. Well, the only thing I can change in there is my response, right? So I can't change the outcome. I can't change the event. So my response is what's there. Shout out to Brian Kite and Tim Kite, his late father, on that one. But the E plus R equals O for me, I'm like, well, if my response is what I have control over, and I can dig deeper and understand what's causing me to respond a certain way, and I can detach from that for a little bit and just, all right, let me just take a little inventory on why I feel the way I feel. Let me take a little inventory on why my visceral reaction is to respond this way. Why is that? What's causing that? And then just press pause and just make sure that what I'm doing is going to move the conversation forward. What I'm doing is going to be a positive influence on the people around me. What I'm doing is going to come from a selfless place where I've owned it myself. As you said, take the power back. It's, I got to own this. And then my responses have been, they just resonate more with people because they're not just reactionary responses. They're actually thought out because I just took a minute, just took a beat, just press pause, just hang on a second. Let me figure this thing out and let me give you back a response that's worthy of your time that you've invested in me, in this conversation. And I think that was the biggest learning lesson for me, was just to just hang tight, just relax, understand that point of view, understand where my point of view is, and let's find a path to move forward.
Everything that you're saying so far in our conversation, is indicative of a lot of growth, right? And that's what we're talking about here. That's so much of what the path of leadership and of being human is, which takes a real commitment. So I'm curious, thinking about your journey over the past few years, what's been the best investment that you've made in yourself and your own growth, personally and professionally?
So this is probably the most bizarre response you're ever going to get on this one. About 7 years ago, I decided to go coach high school football. So my son was a football player, played football. I coached him when he was little. He got into high school, and the high school football coach was like, hey, why don't you join the staff? And I was like, oh, I actually got this other job I got to be at, and I appreciate the opportunity, but probably not. My youth football coaching days, I hung up the whistle, and he's like, no, why don't you come join the staff? And he pushed me a little bit, and I was like, oh, okay, I can do that. I started going to coaching clinics, going to football coaching clinics, and then and I was taking notes feverishly. These football, I didn't know enough to know about it, but I'm just taking notes as fast as I can. And it was another one of those moments where I'm like, hey, I'm doing something that's a little bit challenging for me, but I am totally vested into it, and I'm taking notes and writing things down and getting after it. And admittedly, I'm not the biggest book reader there ever was, but if you give me the audiobook, I'm good to go, right? So, but if I got, and it's a shame because you could highlight, you could dog ear, all the things all the book readers do. But audiobook was for me. But I'm a huge note taker. I've got like just stacks and stacks and stacks of all these 3 reminders that are all highlighted and dog eared. And so when I started down this football coaching journey, it was an investment into myself. But it triggered for me at that moment, like, well, if I'm willing to commit to that in this environment, then why am I not committing to the continued education at work? So what do I need to do differently there? So started looking for the same outlets and the same opportunities, finding places to go speak. To me, sitting on panels and being a speaker at a panel, some people just don't love that and don't like them. I love to do it because I get to meet other people, hear other perspectives, and you bet I'm taking notes on what they're doing so I can learn from them. So I've made that investment to sign up for as many opportunities to go speak as I can. The audiobooks are continuing to flow and podcasts come in, and I love to listen and learn from them. And I'll just grab my phone and hit record, and I'll record what's happening, and I can go back and write my notes down later. But the football coaching path was the one that was just a weird curveball to get me back over here to reinvest back in myself.
I appreciate that response for several reasons. One is that I have kids that are growing up or in sports. You're actually the second person that I've interviewed that has talked about that. And in my mind, it's kind of like, oh, I don't know. Am I coaching? That's if my son wants me to, maybe it's not his team. We'll see how he feels about that. But the other thing that you mentioned is so interesting, right? How these parallel journeys can so influence us in all aspects of our life. And I just love that so much because it's, here's all of these different ways that who I am, no matter what I'm doing, shows up, and there I go, wherever I am. So I really love that.
We used to joke about how I would use, I'd learn, we'd do something at a football practice as a way to try to inspire the kids to do, and I would bring it back to a sales meeting. And they're like, no, this was for football practice, not for us. I was like, oh, I just want to try. I just thought maybe I'd give it a shot. And then vice versa. I take it to the football player. They have no idea. They're like, yes, coach. Okay. I'm like, they have no idea. So,
yeah. Fantastic. Leadership, of course, is also about what we're shaping for tomorrow. So what's your vision for your leadership, your legacy, or the impact that you want to have in the years ahead?
What I mentioned earlier, it was Andrea Vick, who you did the podcast with, and Andrea Vick mentioned my name on the podcast. That was one of those, felt made me feel really nice. And when you look at your, to stay in the coaching and the analogy here for a second, sports analogy, and for a second, the coaching tree. When you look at your coaching tree, so I look at my leadership tree and who's in there, and that legacy of who's gone on to do what. And when those people reach out to me, like I reach out to my mentor, shout out to Sean Shannon. When I reach out to my mentor, I probably need to reach out to him more often. He probably says the same thing. But those people who I have earned the opportunity to work with them in that capacity and as a mentor, I don't take it for granted. I want to spend as much time as I can with folks. I played a part in their career, but they played an even bigger part in my career. I'll tell you, side note, 2 reps that I've worked with in the last 15 years really taught me how to listen better. And I just remember commenting to one of them one time, and they didn't know each other. I commented like, "You are probably the best listener I've ever met in my life. Like, not even just intentionally listening for work, but you intentionally listen no matter what." And so, like, the mentorship that comes this direction, they don't realize it, but it's coming that direction too. I'm taking as much from them as I'm giving them, and vice versa. So that part's good. So for me, the legacy is like, will I be able to, 10, 15 years from now, if this, is my career continues to pivot a little bit, as I don't think I'm in the downside of my career yet, but maybe I'm at the top going this direction at some point. My interactivity with those folks, will I be able to step in as like a senior advisor to them in an unpaid role, of course, but, as a senior advisor, sit on their board of directors, if you will, and continue to be a voice for them. That would be ultimately really cool for me. And if my career path takes me down into education at some point, that would be another thing I would love to look at doing. I know some folks who've left our industry to go work at the universities and do adjunct professor. Those types of things would be super interesting to me. But that's far down the road still for me yet. I'm too young to start thinking about retirement. My wife's probably in the other room going, "Yes, please do it, retire."
Well, I love that so much, and I hear nearly every person that talks about mentorship and about being a mentor talks about how much value there is going in both directions. Of course, I truly believe that we're all leaders, no matter and learners, no matter
Mm-hmm.
where we're at, whether we recognize it or not as well. I'm curious in terms of that. Mentorship in and of itself is its own kind of leadership, right? Distinct perhaps from, the executive position that you have. But as you look at expanding your capacity to mentor in these ways that is your vision, what's your sense of the ways that, you might need to grow in order to become more effective, more impactful as a mentor?
It's a great question. I think what I've learned just in the last probably 6 months, I have another individual that I spend some time with, who's a COO of an advertising agency up in Denver, Colorado. And we spend a lot of time together on the phone talking. And for me, the growth is going to come in. I have to stay insatiably curious about digital marketing services and how it's evolving, and how we're using AI to help drive the business and help drive, our customer success. And for me, it can't just be, "Hey, let me be the mentor you can talk about leadership principles with." I have to also be able to provide value, real time value to them in their roles. And so for me, the growth is going to come. It's just always staying, on the pulse of what's happening in our industry. And I do that now because I'm obviously still in it, and I'm not going anywhere for a long time. But that can't be. I've seen this, and I mentioned maybe at the beginning of the podcast where, effective leadership versus leadership, and effective is the true leadership. I think you can be a leader, hit your numbers, and do things like that, but maybe you're not quite as effective with people. You're not at full scale. I think the people who do stop learning and stop growing, they're the ones who are like, "No, I'm really good at doing this, so I'm going to just do this. And this is where I'm going to stay at this stage in my career. And I'm going to mentor around, how to have tough conversations with employees. I'm going to mentor around, how to inspire, and how to create better disciplined, days and weeks, and, or those things are just part of it. I think for me personally, my growth has to continue to be, how do I take people to a place they didn't think they could get to? How do I take people to a place they couldn't take themselves? And so to do that, I can't stop learning. I can't stop understanding the psychology of people, what makes people tick. And that comes through, in my experience, it comes through just meeting as many people as you can, and doing a great job of listening. I learned from Christine Emmons and Megan Dripe. Taught me to be a great listener. Christine Lindsay, sorry, Christine. Taught me to be a really good listener. And so if I'm out in the field listening, I'm gonna be able to take those things back and then spread them out across that mentorship group.
Well, with the magic of curiosity, the possibility potential is truly limitless, for sure. Curious to hear a little bit about, maybe what's your current growing edge? Where do you feel most tested right now? What challenges are stretching you the most in leadership and in life currently?
I think in leadership, from a work perspective, what's stretching me right now is I'm going to be, blending some cultures and very distinct cultures with some, responsibilities at work that are going to increase. And with that, that's going to be probably one of the tougher things I'm going to have to do in my role here at work is how do I continue to provide value while at the same time, I think like Ty, we talk about like what's the ethos, people talk about discipline, standards, those things, and standards and values I think are incredibly important to me. I just kind of put them all in that ethos. What is the ethos that we're trying to create here? And so I've established it in one part of our business, and now I'm going to have to like create influence across other areas of the business and getting everybody on that same page. I think it's going to be a real tall task for me coming up here at work from a work perspective. That's how we're able to influence and get everybody to play nice together and use each other as a resource.
Well, that certainly seems that word and that capacity to influence becomes increasingly important and requiring a greater, I would say, attunement to what is happening in order to be able to lead at those higher and higher levels. What do you feel like are the ways that in order to grow your influence, right, in the way that's really needed for the organization with the task that's ahead of you here, are the ways that you need to personally grow?
Pause. You got to think about that question a minute. Ask it one more time.
Yeah. Given this way that you want to grow your influence within the organization, what are the ways that you feel like you need to grow as a leader or personally in order to step up and have that and be effective with that next level of influence within the organization?
I think the growth for me is, just learning different style and learning different behaviors and understanding and just kind of putting those through my own filter that I've created for myself. I have this really high standard of what I think an employee should look like in our organization, sales employees specifically. I have a really high standard for what I think a sales manager, a director, a VP, all the folks who work with me and under me in the organization. I have a super high standard for what I'm looking for there. That's going to be a growth challenge for me is how do I get enough buy-in from other folks who aren't part of my leadership team today who could be in the future? How do I get their buy-in on what that standard looks like? I feel sometimes in our business, and this is not just where I work today, it's where I've worked for 2+ decades, is when we have an open spot, we tend to try and hire really quickly. We tend to go fast because, well, that's just dead air there that we need to fill. We got to get somebody going, and the pipeline, the recruitment pipeline, the people we keep in it is critically important. I think the standard by which I want to create influence with the team on is we're not going to settle, and we're going to make sure we've got high character people. And I don't know what the current situation is. Some of these sales leaders and looking for. And so the growth for me is like going to be able to hear them, listen to them, understand their point of view, see if we have alignment, and if we don't, how do we, come from here to get to here? How do we get to alignment on what that's going to look like? Because our people our customers are second to me. Our people are first, and my customers want that. Trust me, they want to make sure that the people are first. And so if we hire right and do right by our folks, then the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. But the growth for me is how to gain alignment with different personality styles that I haven't worked with before, with different areas of the country that I haven't had experience working in, to ensure that our standards and values and the people we bring in are aligned.
This is so much what I appreciate about the journey of leadership is the extent to which it does require us to stretch and grow, especially as your leadership is your responsibilities, is your seniority, right? Grow within an organization. So too does your need to be able to read the room, so to speak, and understand and comprehend more complexity and ambiguity and change. So
their problems are different than my problems, and there's probably problems that I don't know exist that they do know exist, and they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what do you mean you didn't know about this problem? No, I didn't. So tell me more about it. Let me just be as inquisitive and ask a lot of questions and stay engaged, and then continue to just break down the walls that are in front of me.
Sounds like curiosity is going to be a real benefit to that part of the journey as well. So this last question is a little bit more of an invitation. You have the time and the space here to offer to our listeners whatever it is that's most in your mind and heart to share right now. Anything at all, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. I think here's what I would say. Don't start every question. Don't start every response to a question with I think. I'm pretty sure I've done that for the last 30 minutes. I believe and I think are sort of like those interchangeables. But if you believe is probably a little bit deeper word to use there. So use I believe. For the listeners, my experience that I had that I briefly talked about, taking extreme ownership of your own actions, and not letting your ego get in the way of your decision-making process. If you can step back and look at the whole picture and hear everybody's point of view and use influence to get the conversation started and move forward, those things are critical. You have to be a really good person too. Good people want to be around good people. And if you're a good human at heart and you're doing things that you believe are in everybody's best interest above board with a high character outlook on it, you're going to get really great people to work alongside you. I've been very blessed to have worked alongside some awesome people in my career, and people have moved with me to other organizations because we're like-minded and we're after the same set of types of people to come work for us, which are these high character, smart people, smart marketers. And that to me has been the foundation of the success I've had up to this point in my career. Has just been being humble, being empathetic, being a good listener, caring a lot, and doing the work. As long as I do the work and out hustle and outwork, I don't think there's anything that's going to stand in anybody's way of achieving what they want to go do. If you're waiting for somebody to come hand it to you and say, hey, Ty, go work on this. This is what I want you to do. And you want to take it and go, well, you're going to be waiting a long time. You got to advocate for yourself. You got to be your biggest cheerleader. And that just comes with belief. And people get nervous and people get scared. That typically comes as a way of unpreparedness, has been my experience. And so, if you're nervous about taking that next step, just be overly prepared, and you won't be nervous at all taking that step forward.
Well, Kevin, I really appreciate the wisdom that you've shared here today with me. I really have gotten so much out of it. And I'm sure that whoever listens is equally going to benefit from what you've shared here today. Thank you so much for being our guest on the True Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ty.
That's it for this episode of the True Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by One Mountain Leadership, where we help leaders grow the capacity, confidence, and presence of true leadership through the True Leadership approach. To learn more about the approach, our offerings, our community, and how we can help you realize your potential in both leadership and in life, visit us at onemountainleadership.com.